Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. We've been talking about combat in the last few videos, and I'd like to continue that, and I'd like to talk about morale. Morale, in the context of computer and tabletop role-playing games, usually means a system where if you get into combat, the enemies won't always just fight to the death. They will sometimes choose to run away. And usually what will happen is that different types of creatures, just as they have different strengths and different damage and whatever, they will also have a different morale rating. So for example, sort of opportunistic or cowardly type of characters, goblins and thieves and assassins might have a very low morale, and then perhaps sort of fanatical cultists would have a very high morale, and then perhaps mechanical creatures or sort of undead creatures often have morale such that they never run away and that they will always fight to the death. So I've created a very simple system for morale. And I'm going to go through an example or two of it, and then we'll have a look at the code that allowed that to happen. So let's load up the game. All right, so we've got an example of it straight away. We hit for 6 damage. Now the way I've set this system up is that when the enemy's hit points go to half the starting value or less, which in this case is 4 out of 8, of course. So when their hit points are reduced to 4 or less, they make the system makes a random check, and that will result in either the enemy running away and the fight being over straight away, or what has happened here, which is that they steel themselves for a fight to the death. And so because they've done that, we need to keep fighting until we actually kill them. But had the roll gone differently, they would have fled, and the fight would have been over. So let's have a look at how we made that happen. First of all, let's have a look at what new variables we need. And we only need 2. So because we have $M already, being the text variable, which is the message that we're going to print when we print the stats, the state of play, we can't use M for morale, so we have to use MO and MC. MO just standing for morale and MC standing for morale check. So what I've done is I've decided that MO is going to be the percentage chance that the enemy will pass the morale check, which means the percentage chance that they will steel themselves for a fight to the death. And I've just made it 50, so there's an equal chance that that will happen or that they'll run away. And then we have MC, which is keeping track of what's happening with regard to the morale check. And it's initially set to 0. 0 indicates, as you can see in this comment that I've done here, 0 indicates that we haven't yet made the morale check. 1 indicates that we have made the morale check and the enemy passed it, and 2 indicates that we have made the morale check and the enemy failed it. Because in this system we're only going to make the check once. We don't keep making it until they run away, which we could have done, but I've just decided to have it such that it's just a one-off thing that you can't rely on. So we have MO, which is the percentage chance of them running away. Sorry, it's actually the opposite. It's the percentage chance of them deciding to fight to the death. And then we have MC, which keeps track of where we're at in terms of that check. Of course, it isn't always necessary, because the enemy might die without ever being reduced to less than half their hit points. So, for example, let's say they've got 5 hit points, and then you hit them for 5 or 6 damage. Well, they're dead, and so we bypass the need for a morale check entirely. Or they might win, they might kill you. But let's look at the where do we need to add code relating to the morale check? Well, there's quite a few as I've set it up, even though to describe it, it's quite simple. To code it is actually a little bit complicated. We need a morale check when several requirements are reached. First of all, if we're in the bit of code that deals with the attack actually hitting, because we're never going to make a morale check after an attack that misses. So the first thing is if $Z, which is a random number from 1 to 20 plus the relevant attack bonus, is over the relevant armor class, which means a hit. So firstly, if we're in the bit of code that deals with a hit. Secondly, if $AT is equal to 0, which means if the attacker is the player character and therefore the defender is the non-player character, remembering that 0 always indicates, in this particular program, we're using 0 to indicate the player character and 1 to indicate the non-player character. And there's several more requirements. So going from, I'll start from the end and go back because they get more complicated. They start off complicated and get less so. So first of all, MC has to be equal to 0. In other words, we haven't yet made the morale check. Secondly, the current hit points of the enemy has to be greater than 0. So $H square bracket 1 N square bracket has to be greater than 0. And finally, $H square bracket 1, so the enemy's current hit points, times 2 has to be less than or equal to $S square bracket 1 N square bracket. So remembering that just as $H indicates the current hit points, $S indicates the starting hit points. So it's saying if we multiply the current hit points by 2, in order to trigger this check, as well as these other requirements, it has to be less than or equal to the starting hit points of the enemy. In other words, they have to be down to half their starting hit points or less. So if all of those things are met, then we trigger a morale check. First thing we do is we put a couple of line breaks at the end of the variable M, remembering that M doesn't have anything to do with morale. It stands for message, and it's the message that we're going to print when we print the current state of play. So actually making the morale check is much simpler than determining whether we need to make it. Making it's fairly simple. We go if random 1 to 100, so bracket 1, 100, end bracket, is less than or equal to $MO, which is the morale value, which I've arbitrarily set to 50 in the previous screen. So if a random number from 1 to 100 is less than or equal to 50, which has a exactly 50% chance of happening, then we do this bit of code. Otherwise, we do this other bit of code. So the bit of code, if that condition is met, which is that we add to M, your enemy steals themselves for a fight to the death. I'm not sure if themselves is grammatically correct, but I'll check that later. So your enemy steals themselves for a fight to the death, and we set MC equal to 1, which you will remember from the previous page is the value meaning that they're going to fight to the death. Otherwise, the alternative is we add to M, your enemy sorely wounded flees, so they've had enough, they don't want to fight anymore, and the player character has 1, and we set MC equal to 2. And that is mostly it. most of the code is there. There is a little bit. There is a couple of other things. Firstly, when we're printing the state of play, when the enemy has decided to run away, we don't print their hit points anymore. I don't know if that was actually you didn't see that because they made their morale check and so decided to fight to the death. But had they run away, I decided that I wouldn't print their hit points anymore because it's stopped being relevant. So when we get to the bit of code that deals with printing the hit points of the enemy, which is this code here, which I won't go into in detail because I went into this previously, but we've added to that code if $MC exclamation mark equals, which means does not equal 2. If $MC does not equal 2, then print the hit points of the enemy. Otherwise, there's no else. So if MC is equal to 2, then we just skip this code. There's no alternative that happens. And the other thing that happens is, of course, if the enemy has run away, we don't want the fight to continue. That would be meaningless. So we have an extra bit of code here. So where we have the code that says if $H square bracket $DE n square bracket is less than 1, in other words, if the defender's hit points are less than 1, then we print a message saying either you are dead or you have survived, depending on who the defender currently is. DE is the variable that indicates the current defender. And this is the new bit. Else if $MC is equal to 2, then we print the message that says you've survived, because now hit points don't matter anymore. The enemy has had enough and has decided to run away. Otherwise, and this is the code for continuing the battle. So we add these two lines here so that if the enemy has made a morale check and failed that morale check and therefore decided to run away, we don't accidentally continue the battle, which would be not what we want to happen in terms of the story of the game. So that is a very simple system of morale. We could have more complicated systems. We could have, if, for example, when we add multiple characters fighting, we might decide to have perhaps different enemies might have different amounts of morale, and perhaps some of them might run away and others of them decide to fight. But we'll come to those more complicated options as we develop the system. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.